welcome to this webinar, the top 7 chatbot use cases for learning. We're delighted to have you with us, whether you're watching live and participating live or watching the recording. For those of you that are here in person, thank you. Well, over Zoom in person. We'll be moving fast today, try to get through the material. Please feel free to engage through the chat if you've got questions or comments. You can raise your hand. Aaron, I see that you've raised your hand. Please pop in your question or request or anything like that in the chat, and we'll monitor there. Everyone will be getting a link to the recording after the webinar, hopefully today. That's the goal. And stay tuned to the end, because at the end we've got some complimentary chatbots that we've prepared for you. So I think the material we'll get through, probably in 30-35 minutes, and we'll leave some time at the end for some questions. So with that, let's get started. Sponsoring today's webinar is Mobile Coach. Mobile Coach is our company, founded in 2013, located in the beautiful Wasatch Mountains of Provo, Utah. Our primary product is the Mobile Coach platform, which is a chatbot authoring tool. And it allows people to design chatbots of all types and use cases and manage them all in one central place. So with that, let's get started with some introductions. For those of you that may not know me, I'll be the host of today's webinar. My name is Vince Hahn. I'm the CEO and founder of Mobile Coach. You can see my LinkedIn on. If we're not already connected via LinkedIn, I would love to connect with you. Just pop your phone right in front of that QR code on any of these QR codes and connect with us. So I'm delighted to be here and to participate with you on this webinar. So then I'll have my colleagues Paul and Corey introduce themselves.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'm Paul Bills. As you can see here, I'm the Director of Chatbot Design. What that really means is I lead our professional services team that helps develop and implement chatbots to help our clients reach their goals.
And hi, I'm Corey Richards. I started on Paul's team, so I spent 5 years helping our clients create and design chatbots. And now I support our partner relationships, so helping our partners with their chatbots.
So thank you, Paul and Corey, for joining me on today's webinar. Helps me not have to try to cover everything on my own. So, and plus Corey and Paul are both chatbot experts, and so this will be great to collaborate together today. Hey, we're going to dive in. I'm going to set some context before we dive into the top 7 use cases. I always like to start by coming up with some common definitions about what a chatbot is, especially since that's the topic of today's webinar. There are different types of chatbots. Oftentimes when we talk with people for the first time about chatbots, what's in their mind, and perhaps what's in your mind, is the sort of the most common consumer experience of a chatbot that's described over here on the left, where you go to some public website and a chat window pops open, and it's typically either a customer service type of user experience that says, hey, how can I help you? And other times it's very commonly a sales type of chatbot where it's saying, hey, do you want to learn more? Do you want to talk to a sales representative? So that's where a lot of us have had experiences with chatbots. And typically that use case is answering basic FAQs and helping you navigate to as a visitor of that website. So this middle use case is a variation of a theme of the first, where it's still sort of a web-based user experience where you have a chat window popping open on a web browser or some sort of web desktop type of software. But instead of treating you as an anonymous user like a public website would, it's behind some sort of login, so it can understand and recognize who you are. So instead of saying, hi stranger, it might say, hi Vince, welcome back. And that would enable the chatbot to provide a lot more of a personalized user experience. And then on the right here is a chatbot that's on a common mobile messaging platform on your phone. Maybe that's SMS, maybe that's a messaging app like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. And I think the definition of a chatbot is any sort of computer simulated conversation. And the real sort of instructional design difference between having a chatbot on a mobile messaging platform versus these first two is that on these first two, once you leave that website, you're disconnected from the chatbot. In addition to that, most of the use cases over here are transactional, where you, as the chatbot user, maybe have a single question, and once that question is resolved, you're done. But if you have a chatbot over on a mobile messaging platform, you have the opportunity for that chatbot to actually create a relationship with the user and have a conversation extended over time, maybe for a month or 6 months or years for that matter. Because over here, the chatbot can then initiate a conversation. So like, hey, happy Monday. Here's a motivational quote for you or something like that. And that's something that a chatbot can do on a mobile messaging platform that can't be done on a website. So they're all chatbots, but depending on the modality of your chatbot, they can look and feel, and the experience can be very different. Maybe to put in one other way is that a lot of the web-based chatbots that you experience are passive, meaning they're really not going to engage with you until you engage with it. And some of the more highly functional chatbots are what we call programmatic, where they're rules-based. You can see a diagram here of some decision tree rules that are being triggered. Chatbots for learning can be a blend of both, and we're actually going to talk about that as we go through these top 7 use cases. But primarily, I think where most of the light bulbs will go on in your head, hopefully today, will be on the programmatic side, where you can think of certain conditions or triggers that would really help aid the learning experience of somebody based on where they are in their learning path, based on the content that they're trying to consume. So anyway, that's sort of a basic primer on chatbots, and hopefully sets the stage of having some common language as we go through these top 7 use cases. So these are the top 7 use cases. Training reinforcement, we're going to go over each of these in detail, and we'll actually have some demos for you to try. So training reinforcement, new hire onboarding, microlearning courses, coaching, safety and compliance, LMS integration, performance support. We've taken this list in terms of what defines the top 7. At Mobile Coach, we've done thousands of chatbots, and many of those are supporting organizations that are driving learning programs for their companies. And so this list is derived from that experience in terms of the top 7. What I'm going to do now is launch a poll, because I'm curious which of these will resonate with you the most. And the poll will have 2 questions. The first will be, which of these are you interested in? And based on your poll responses, we might spend a little bit more time when we get to that use case just to match your interest. The other question is, we'll be addressing a chatbot channel. You can have a chatbot on anywhere you can have a conversation. We've already talked about that a little bit, on a web page, via SMS, or in this era of COVID, we've seen a huge push for adopting these workplace collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams, Slack, WebEx Teams. So I'm curious also, if you deployed a chatbot for learning, where would it be? What channel would be most appropriate for you? So there'll be 2 questions. I'm launching the poll now. So we'll give everybody a second to answer. If you happen to answer other in either question, just pop in the chat what your thoughts are, so we can understand that. But I'll give everybody a minute. Hopefully everyone's seeing the poll. I'm seeing a chatbot poll in progress, but there we go. 3 of 22 are answering. Just take a minute, please, and participate. And we'll publish the poll results here in a minute. 45% voted so far, 50%. Here we go. Let's get a few more people voting. All right, just going to give you 10 more seconds. We've got 77% of you voted. Great. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. Well, looks like we still got people voting. 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're going to close the poll. And I'm going to share the results, and hopefully, can you see the results of the poll? Thumbs up if you can, or thumbs up in the, all right, great. So let's look at this. 68% of you, training reinforcement, that was the winner. The new hire onboarding, micro learning courses, that rated high. LMS integration rated pretty high. That's really interesting. Let's look down here at the chatbot channels. SMS came in at number 1. That's very interesting to me. Zoom as well, and some of these others. A little bit surprising that Microsoft Teams only got one vote. That's something we're seeing a lot of. So great. Thanks for participating. And if you, again, want to pop in the chat if you have other ideas or questions, then love to hear those. All right. So with that, let's dive into these top 7 chatbot use cases. Let's talk about the first one. Training reinforcement. It just so happened to be the number 1 result in the poll. This is the idea where a user or a learner is going through some formal training, whether that's instructor-led, in person, or over virtual, whether it's blended, whether it's self-paced. There's some sort of formal learning experience, but then what happens afterwards? What happens to retention, sustainability? So a chatbot is a great it's a great vehicle to tackle that. So this chatbot can help learners remember and apply learning from a training event. For each of these use cases, you're going to see slides of this format. So let me just take a second and orient you to the slide. Every use case will have an SMS option for you to try. This is just for you to try. This is just demoware. This is not going to like text you endlessly. It's going to be over after today's webinar. So if you want to try these, and if you want to try the SMS option, you pop open a new text message on your phone, put in the phone number, in this case 801-609-3592, and just text hi and hit send. If you want to try it via Microsoft Teams or web widget, instead of having to type these in, I think Corey is putting in the chat the link so you can just click on those and try it there. So anyway, this is training reinforcement. So as we park here on this one, I've done enough talking. So Paul, I think you've got a use case where you'd like to share where maybe you can bring this particular use case to life a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So this is one of our most popular use cases at Mobile Coach, but one I wanted to highlight, there was a major car manufacturer here in the US, and they were trying to teach their salespeople a very specific sales process. So there's reports that needed to be done in a certain way at certain times. It's pretty boring content, honestly, but it's something that they need everybody to comply with for everything to work well for the entire organization. So they had a pretty clever chatbot design where they were taught this new process in an in-person training, and then the chatbot for 2 weeks every day would in the morning text them and say, okay, I'm ready with 2 questions today, text ready when you're ready to answer them. And then when they texted ready, they would get points for answering that question right, or even if they got it wrong, they got some points, and they got more points if they answered quickly. And then there was a leaderboard gamifying it just a little bit so that everyone could really get down the details of this specific new sales report process. And that chatbot was very successful. It had over 90% participation rate, very high, and also great user feedback. People actually enjoyed the process, even though this was pretty dry, pretty strict content that often you get the reaction of people not wanting to do it, not thinking it's important, or thinking it's annoying to be reminded all the time. This particular chatbot, the way it was done, actually turned that into something fun and actually increased compliance as well for these new reports. So it was really a great use case overall.
So in that use case, Paul, what was the format of training that people were going through that was being reinforced? Was it instructor-led?
Yeah, it was instructor-led training, but it was done in several different regions. So they split up their workforce into regions in the US, and there were several different instructor-led trainings based on the region, but then everyone got the same chatbot content. So it also helped reinforce uniformly across all the different regions.
And another question about that use case, what channel did that company use for their chatbot?
They used SMS.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So, I think what's really interesting about all chatbot design, I think you'll see this as we go through these different use cases, is that the design can be very different from from chatbot to chatbot. So you'll see just like some general design elements on this slide: duration 4 to 8 weeks, 2 to 3 pushed messages a week. I've seen designs where it's much longer, designs that are much shorter. Sometimes maybe 2 or 3 push messages a week might feel like too much, and other times it might not feel like enough. And so I think that's a really key point in today's webinars, to know that you want to design your chatbot to match the context of the training, of the learning experience, and of the audience. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Just before we leave this one and go to the next use case, maybe some tidbits on some things we've learned, interesting things we've learned about the training reinforcement use case. Corey or Paul, anything to share about that?
Yeah, I'll add one thing. I mentioned that that use case I was talking about, they said text ready when you're ready. The reason we did that is because we tried an earlier chatbot with a similar group. And one of the reasons the chatbot felt less effective to that group was because the messages would come at an inconvenient time. So allowing some personalization of timing can really increase the effectiveness regardless of what the content is. And that's something we really learned in this particular use case.
Yeah, great. Last question on this, and we'll move on to the next one. For this use case, and for really any chatbot use cases, how do we know what the ROI is? How do you know that whether the chatbot's being effective and actually positively affecting business results in our learning programs?
I'll jump in on that. I think one of the most important pieces is when you're designing the chatbot, you actually have to have that in mind. So one of the reasons that these 7 use cases are really effective is because generally they are ones that have important business results, are conversations that need to happen. And so you can then effectively measure, with this training reinforcement, you could have a specific business result that you're looking for, which you can then measure at the end of the chatbot. So when you're building the chatbot, you can make sure there are checks, benchmarks, questions, or outside data that is all used to make sure that this is an effective tool.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Corey. And for any of you, if you've got questions about how to measure chatbot effectiveness, please put the questions in the chat. Just a quick note in the chat: if you do have a question, please select the panelists and attendees option, just so that everyone can see your question. Unless, of course, you've got a private question, then of course feel free to ask a private question. Let's go to the next one. We'll maybe go through these next 6 a little bit quicker. New hire onboarding. So this is the idea where, of course, you've got a new hire, and I guess typically I could describe a new hire onboarding process like, the business isn't going to give you, if you're responsible for new hire onboarding training, they're not going to give you adequate time to really teach new hires everything that they need to learn in the time they're going to give you. So let's say that you've got a day for orientation. It's sort of like hooking that new hire up to a fire hose, turning it on full blast, and just hoping that something will stick. It doesn't seem terribly effective. And a chatbot can be a wonderful way to meter out the learning curve in a more reasonable fashion. And not just around training materials, but it can be administratively, like deadlines around, here's when you need your healthcare forms filled out. It could be cultural assimilation type of things. So a wonderful use case is new hire onboarding. I should also parenthetically mention that new manager onboarding didn't quite make our top 7, but that's also was probably number 8 because that's a really common use case as well. And I think for this one, Corey, you have a use case you'd like to share.
Yes, I do. So we worked with Akamai on a new hire chatbot named Avi, and Akamai had, similar to what Vince is saying, trouble helping their new hires specifically accomplish a certification, which is a great way to track ROI to see, okay, we know that our new hires need to be doing this, and we're seeing that they're not getting their certification complete within the expected amount of time. So then the chatbot was there to not only support that, get them the tools and information they need, keep them on track by sending reminders and check-ins, but also just to help with all of the onboarding process. So to kind of be there as their support buddy. And we had some really great results with that one, where users of Avi were more likely to complete the certification on at all. And then also they generally completed it faster than people without it. So just this simple chatbot that helped them stay on track really created that end result that Akamai was looking for.
Thank you. And I should just note that Akamai is a really important company that a lot of people have never heard of. You can check them out at akamai.com, and they're like an internet caching high-tech company that's probably not doing their company service. But I think one of their dynamics was that they're so technical that there's this learning curve for their new hires to get up to speed. There is actually a nice case study on this that maybe we could drop the link into the chat for people if you want to see a little bit more information about this. We're going to move on to the next one. Just watching the clock a little bit. Microlearning. So, I think that when I first started diving into chatbots 6, 7, 8 years ago, most people I worked with were comfortable having chatbots just maybe being very simplistic and sending just a reminder here or there. But nowadays, I think chatbots are the technology has come a long way. And plus, I think users are now accustomed to interacting with computers. And so there's a lot more you can do with chatbots in terms of potentially even replacing an e-learning course with a chat experience. And so what I mean by that is, imagine your quintessential 30-minute e-learning where, you've got slides with voiceover and with maybe an assessment at the end. We know that in a lot of cases, there's limited efficacy because people are trying to just race their way through and click, 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 and maybe they're even multitasking and guessing at the assessment at the end. What about, instead of having that experience, putting that same content and putting it into a conversation and teaching people the same content, maybe instead of 30 minutes over a couple of days? I think that can be a really compelling learning experience. So it's been exciting because we've seen more and more really cool use cases that are embracing microlearning in terms of their chatbot experience. And I think, Paul, you've got a use case you'd like to share here.
Yeah, the screenshots you're seeing on screen on this slide are from a chatbot that we have developed in partnership with an organization in Australia. This chatbot is called Frankie, and the idea of this chatbot, it's a chatbot to fight against workplace burnout and increased workplace wellness, developed with a lot of scientific data from the World Health Organization and from experience of different employees at different large corporations around the world. And so what this chatbot does is it starts with an initial assessment to gauge what your areas of energy need are in over 16, well, I think it's 16 total areas. And then it creates a personal curriculum just for you, finding 6 out of those 16 areas where you most need work. And then it then teaches you how to increase energy in that area, and then does follow-up challenges for 10 days each on each of those 6 areas to help you actually put into practice what you learn about how to increase your energy. So as opposed to a traditional e-learning, this is actually sticking with you and helping you put into practice over the course of 2 months what you're learning. And I think it has a much better chance of making a real difference in your workplace energy than if you just watched a 30-minute e-learning, because it's following you, it's giving you things to do, and it's making sure that you're actually feeling a change in your life.
One thing I love about this use case is that, of course, a lot of the topics that Paul is describing are skills and lifestyle related things, because of course the business problem here that this chatbot is trying to solve is employee burnout, which of course has implications around efficiency and how the business is performing. And I think one of the most common topics that the assessment finds that people need to improve on is like their commitment to getting enough sleep. Raise your hand in the chat if you need to work on your commitment to get enough sleep. But that's something that you could logically understand and nod your head, yeah, that makes sense. But to put into practice and to really learn it, requires practice. And so I think that's where this chatbot really shines, because a lot of the areas where you need to work on requires practice and accountability. And that, that's a function of, so if the chatbot's helping you practice and learn those things and identify how to get better sleep over a couple weeks, you're going to be a lot more likely to achieve that than just nodding your head at some seminar where they say, hey, everyone raise your hand if you're going to try to get better sleep. And so that's one example of where a chatbot can be really powerful for microlearning, because it can stay with you over time to really help you learn these skills. So thank you. Let's move on to the next use case, which is coaching.
Sorry, I'm going to cut you off. I just want to really quickly plug. We actually have a webinar about that. So Noel in the chat wanted to know a little bit more about how to make this design, what it takes to create this. And we actually have a webinar April 28th at 4 Eastern. So I just put that in the chat. So anyone interested in learning more about Frankie and what it took to build it, you can come join us in that webinar.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks for the plug. All right. One of the when people ask me, well, why a chatbot? Is this just sort of a whiz bang technology that the only reason people are using it because it's like the latest and greatest, but it lacks real substance? Well, no. Chatbots are really powerful because they provide immediacy. And in this world today, we all are expecting immediate answers and immediate access to questions that we have or to resources that we want. It's so easy to use. Hopefully you're seeing in some of these demos that you're trying, it's just, there's really no learning curve. You don't have to download software. But to the organization, perhaps the most compelling reason to use a chatbot is scalability. Because a chatbot never goes to sleep. It can have hundreds of thousands of millions of conversations at the same time. It can speak multiple languages, and so it just can. If there are conversations happening in your organization over and over again, why not automate them? So this next one, we get a lot of inquiries around. Hey, it goes something like this. Hey Vince, we know that coaching works, and so we're really committed to a coaching culture. But coaching is very expensive and is very difficult to scale, and we don't have the budget to have, a human coach look after all of our people that need coaching. And so that's where it's okay. What can a chatbot do? Now, a chatbot cannot replace a really skilled coach in terms of emotional intelligence. I mean, if you've tried to have an emotionally intelligent conversation with like Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant, it's going to be very limiting. But a chatbot, so while a chatbot can't do that, chatbot for coaching can be wonderful at providing accountability to people, helping people keep track of the goals that they have, giving them the reminders of objectives that they have, giving people practice in terms of conversation simulators. And you can try out a conversation simulator. I think we put a link in the chat for you to know what that's like. So I think this is a really compelling use case, and I think Corey, you've got a use case you'd like to describe.
Yes, yeah. So I have this really interesting use case. It's actually a partnership that we've done with Emma Weber, who runs Lever Transfer of Learning, and we've created a chatbot with her that kind of automates these conversations to help people remember, utilize, and take action on training. And it's really unique just because with this chatbot, you set an action plan. So you're creating goals and what you want to accomplish after a learning event. And then the chatbot actually has 30-minute conversations at 3 different points throughout the experience, where you sit down and you chat back and forth. And you really work through your goals. You think through what have you accomplished and what are your next steps? What else do you need to do? And work through barriers and things like that. So it really takes on a lot of what a real coach does, but through a chatbot. So it's a really unique and cool way to be using a chatbot.
And I think that she's seen some really impressive statistics around her design of her chatbot, which is very innovative. Getting all choked up, I'm so. I'm so overwhelmed by how great this chatbot use case is. Yeah, so she's seen some really impressive, eye-opening results in terms of engagement. Like, will people really sit down for 20, 30 minutes and go through an exercise? And she's finding that people will. And that's some really meaningful investment from a users, from a coachee's perspective of really being committed to whatever path that they're on in terms of their growth. So let's move on to the next one. Safety and compliance, maybe not as interesting in terms of content, but we all have to go through. Oftentimes these are required training programs, and so what about having a chatbot administer these programs? I think there's a lot of benefits of having a chatbot do that. So Paul, do you want to share some experiences with this use case?
Yeah, so we have a client that is a large manufacturer and distributor, and they have thousands of warehouse workers. And if you've ever tried to train people in a warehouse, you know that there's several challenges. They're on their feet all day. They don't sit at a computer. They often are very strict schedules, so you can't take time away from what they're doing. So there's several challenges to reaching this audience, but a chatbot can cut through a lot of that. So in this particular case, what we did is there was a chatbot that would send every day a very short, under 2-minute video clip of a required training, and it would send it to a shift manager, and it would both message on their phone, but also email them if they chose this clip. So they could pull that clip, just gather the team. They had a required team meeting at the beginning of every shift anyway. So they could take 2 minutes in that meeting, show this clip, and then the chatbot would send just 1 or 2 discussion points for after watching the clip. And then at the end of 20 days, they've gone through the entire training, that's this required workplace safety training. And then everyone can take just the quiz to prove that they've passed the course. So instead of taking everybody's individual time to do an e-learning course, you're taking existing time, just 2 minutes a day, and then everyone has the knowledge they need to prove that they've taken the required training. And so this is saving time and money for this company, and also giving, in my opinion, a better experience to these employees that need to take this required training. So it was really a good use case.
And I think that there's really two, just to reinforce 2 of those points you just made. A lot of times safety and compliance training, one obstacle is reaching an audience that's hard to reach. So in this case, people on their feet, they don't have computers or workstations available to them. And so this was a way to reach them. And then secondly, to make it a more entertaining, edutaining type of user experience where, ultimately that means that people are going to be paying more attention. And this is, of course, despite my joke that maybe the content's a little drab, of course, it's vitally important that people understand workplace safety. So this is a great use case. We're going to keep moving on. If you remember at the beginning, we took a poll, and I think the second most use case that you were interested in was LMS integration. So Corey, do you want to describe what this is?
Yes, I'd love to. So with LMS integration, there really are 2 components. And the first one is creating a chatbot on your LMS website. So we're actually doing an integration right now with a global organization who uses Moodle, who were being inundated with questions or issues of people even just signing in or not knowing how to find things. And they needed a support tool. So the chatbot is just able to pop up and become the concierge. So become the place where they can ask their FAQs, get support. They can actually get some guidance on what courses to take, so get some suggestions, and just sit right there on their LMS and support the users with their LMS experience. And then the other piece is we could also do a mobile integration. So we've done this where on SMS or Teams or in other channels, your chatbot can be an extension of the LMS. So a really common issue is actually getting people to the website, reminding them of deadlines, getting them back to finish their courses or starting required courses. So the chatbot can be that reminder. It can sit there, talk to them, and bring them back to the course, remind them of deadlines, and even then reinforce learning after they've finished a course.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that there's sort of two main modalities. The first is when I log into the LMS, there's a chatbot there that's aware of who I am. And you might ask, well, why do you need a chatbot there when they're already in the LMS? Well, LMSs can be confusing. There can be tons of content. I may not know where to start. So if I'm just interacting with a chatbot, it could help me sort through that and really help me understand the LMS. And then the second use case I'm hearing from Corey is the mobile extension, which to me gets me very excited about the fact that once I'm engaged with the LMS and then leave it to go about my daily work, I think that organizations struggle getting people back into the LMS. And so if I'm getting a text message or a Microsoft Teams message to say, hey, Vince, you started this course 3 weeks ago. Here's the link to go finish it. That to me is a very compelling use case and a great way to use the chatbot. So we have one more. We've done 6. Here's the 7th, and that is performance support. How can a chatbot be used for performance support? Paul, will you take this use case?
Yeah, so we've had an idea for a while that we call the acronym bot. It's a very simple idea, but it's proven to be very powerful. The basic setup of the idea is that a chatbot is there and ready 24/7. You send it an acronym and it gives you the definition. That's all it does. But we implemented this with a large national corporation, and they had hundreds of acronyms. And actually on this, for the particular position that we were serving with this chatbot, there was an 18-month ramp up time for these employees because their job was very technical, very complicated. And so this little chatbot, while it was pretty easy to produce, made a big difference for them. They're in meetings, they're hearing all these acronyms fly around. They don't need to interrupt anybody. They don't need to stop the flow of things. They can just quietly on their phone or on their computer, type in that acronym, get back a definition, and they're up to speed with the conversation. So it was this particular use case, there wasn't a large number of users, but those users were very dedicated because this really solved a problem for them in this very long ramp up time of a very complicated, complex organization. So like I said, it's a little thing, but it made a big difference.
I think acronym bot is most of us are in industries where there's just too many acronyms. And so if I'm brand new to the organization, I'm in a meeting, all of a sudden these acronyms are flying around. That's really intimidating. I'm certainly not going to stop the meeting to ask what this acronym means. And even if I Google the acronym, that acronym answer on Google might be different from what the acronym is in my organization. So if I could just very quickly go to a chatbot and pop in an acronym and get a result, that I think is a really compelling user experience. And also other things like for salespeople having right at their fingertips on their phone, access to product information, to FAQs, where it's more of a frictionless experience where I'm not having to call somebody or having to wade through an intranet or a CRM or anything like that. I can just ask the chatbot. So those are our top 7 use cases. I just want to, we do have a few more things in terms of what I think some of you might be wondering. All right, this is great. I get it. There's lots of use cases for chatbots. How would you then put one together? Well, let's spend a minute talking about authoring a chatbot and how you would actually put it together. Then we'll spend just a couple minutes on some other design tips for you, and then we'll wrap up with questions. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of show you the mobile coach interface. Now, there are many other chatbot platforms. They all have sort of their different strengths and what they play to. We're just going to give you a sense of how the mobile coach platform works. So here, the idea of the mobile coach platform is that we cater mostly to programmatic chatbots, these sort of decision tree type of chatbots where you're going to be authoring your message, choosing your channel, and then putting all the conditions in of when you want that chatbot to be, when you want that chatbot to send a message. So here's just a simple script where I'm writing in my script. Here's what I want the chatbot to say. I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how the platform works. Then you can program in all your conditions of, okay, if the user says this, then I want the chatbot to send that. And that's the section where you would put in all your decision tree aspects. And of course, you can calendar them to say, okay, well, I want this message to be sent on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Or perhaps you'd prefer program day and to say, okay, I have a 90-day program, so I want this message to be sent on program day 45 or something like that. So our authoring tool gives you the ability to sort of architect in your mind, here's the experience that I want. And maybe you'll say, here's the experience I want for everybody in this cohort, or maybe there are 5 different experiences I want to design and funnel people through based on their context. And we've got the ability to come in and choose what channels you want to enable. So you can design your chatbot in one place and then say, yeah, I want this to be on SMS, I want this to be on web chat, I want this to be on WhatsApp and Teams. And so you can turn on all these different channels and allow users to interact with your chatbot in the channel that's most convenient for them. This is just the tip of the iceberg of our platform. And of course, many other platforms have different ways to author chatbots. But I just wanted to, if you're like me, I'm very visual. So I wanted, you might say, well, how do I put this together? And this will gives you an example of how you would put it together on the Mobile Coach platform. So if anyone is interested in a more in-depth view of how our platform works, especially if you've got a vision for how you want your chatbot to work, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to walk you through a more in-depth demo. We're even happy to set up sandbox accounts for those that are wanting to dabble into chatbot design. So just a couple more slides and then we'll take some questions. I'd be really curious to see what questions you have, as well as any comments or ideas that you have. But when you step back and say, okay, well, I was just actually on a webinar yesterday and I got a question around, well, Vince, this seems really overwhelming. Where do I start? It's not overwhelming. There is a learning curve, but this framework is helpful for me to say, okay, when I'm designing a chatbot for learning, there are 3 main buckets that I'm going to pay attention to. The first is modality. What chatbot channel is best suited for my audience? And we talked a little bit about that earlier, right? So is it Microsoft Teams? Is it SMS? Is it on my LMS? That's really going to help narrow down your design requirements. Because a chatbot on your LMS is going to behave very differently than a chatbot that you might design for SMS. So choose your modality, and it might be in your organization that your privacy and security team will have a very strong opinion or even a mandate on what modalities they will allow. So in many organizations, SMS is not allowed. So you might have to choose one of these other modalities. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is then, okay, what's the content that I need? Now, for chatbots, since the chatbots are conversations, typically you're not needing reams and reams of content. You're probably needing, dozens and dozens of scripts. And so that's not overwhelming to write, but to really figure out, okay, what is the content that I need my chatbot to have a library of messages with? And then that function is simply taking oftentimes existing training content and making it chatbot friendly, turning it into conversational snippets. A little bit of a learning curve there, but not difficult to do. And then the third bucket is understanding the context. And this is going to drive your decision tree. Understanding, okay, what's the right cadence of messages? If I'm pushing out messages, are we going to push it out every day or once a week? Well, if you're pushing it out once a week, that really simplifies a lot of your design requirements because now, again, you're not having to create a mountain load of logic or context or content. So this helps me at least simplify the process. What's my modality? What's the content that I need? And what's the context that's going to drive sort of the functionality and the right level of logic in my chatbot? So hopefully that's helpful to you. We have some final tips here, and I've asked Paul, who's our director of chatbot design. There's 4 tips that we're going to share with you very briefly. So Paul, I'll click while you talk.
Okay, perfect. So the first step here, clear expectations. And this is expectations all around. So your stakeholders need to have clear expectations about, if you say chatbot, there's all kinds of things they could think it might do. You want to tell them exactly what your chatbot will do. And the same for your end users. You want them to know this chatbot is here for this purpose. Another way that I sometimes phrase this is you want to hire a chatbot for a specific job. So it's not doing everything, it's doing one specific thing. Next step is iterate. After you launch it, it's not done. There's an old quote from, I was an English major, there's an old quote, a poem is never done, simply abandoned. And I think the same thing is true for chatbots. It's never actually done. You keep exploring your feedback, you keep changing it, you keep updating it. Personality, I often say personality second. People want their information and they want their functionality first. And if you can do that and provide that reliably, then if you can provide some personality, that's what really makes the experience sing. So make sure you're giving people what they need and then add just a little bit of personality, not too much. And then finally, this goes along with iterate. You want user feedback in multiple forms. So you want to be asking questions within the chatbot, outside the chatbot, having informal conversations. You need to close that loop as often as possible so that you know, is this really serving the people that it's aiming to serve? So that real quick, I mean, there's a lot more we could say on all those things. We could probably do a whole webinar, but those are the key tips, I think.
And on personality, to me, that's things like giving your chatbot a fun name. You can have chatbots send. I saw this in the chat. Send images, send emojis, thumbs up. Things like that, where you don't need your chatbot to try to be clever or a comedian or anything like that, but just little things like that to give it a little bit of personality and entertainment. I think goes a long way. So as we wrap up, we have just some free chatbots for you here. These are all configured on the Mobile Coach platform, but you can try these out. The language bot, you can choose from, I think, 4 or 5 different languages, and in over 30 days, it'll teach you a phrase every day and give you a little bit of a quiz. I think it's kind of a fun chatbot experience. Unconscious bias, this bot will help you understand and review, I think, 7 different biases over a week or 2. So you can try that one out. And then this one over here, TeenSpeak, is my personal favorite. This chatbot will help you learn lingo that teenagers are speaking today. So if you want to chuckle, then try this TeenSpeak chatbot. So I think Corey's putting the links to all of these in the chat for you to try out. So with that, I know we're a little bit over time. We will stick around for any questions that we have. I know a lot of you had questions in the chat that Corey and Paul have been answering, but are there other questions that people have that we haven't answered? We'd be happy to take a few minutes and answer those. And thank you for those of you that are joining and tuning out. We'll get you a recording. We really appreciate your attendance today. It was a great interaction in the chat, and hope you enjoyed the webinar. So with that, questions? Seems like we covered a lot of them in the chat. All right, well, if there are no questions right now, you can always reach out to us through the emails that you're going to get sent. And thank you again for joining us. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone.